Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Nell Pepper, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore's New Voices in Fiction series presented with GrubStreet, I'm so pleased to introduce this virtual event with Daphne Palasi Andreades, presenting her debut novel, Brown Girls, in conversation with Megha Majumdar. I hope you're all well and safe. Thank you so much for joining us virtually tonight. Through virtual events like tonight's, Harvard Bookstore continues to bring authors and their work to our community. Every week, we host events here on our Zoom account, and upcoming virtual events include Jabari Azim in conversation with Adrian Walker, Jamie Attenberg in conversation with Benjamin Dreyer, and Bernadine Evaristo. Please check out the event schedule on our website at harvard.com. And while you're there, you can sign up for our email newsletter for more updates and to browse our bookshelves from home. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question for our speakers at any time during the talk tonight, you can click on the Q&A button on your screen, and we will get through as many questions as time allows. This event will have closed captioning available. Depending on the version of Zoom that you're using, you may need to enable captions yourself by clicking on the closed caption button on your screen. In the chat, I will be posting a link to purchase copies of Brown Girls on harvard.com, as well as a link to donate in support of the series and of our store. Your purchases and financial contributions make events like tonight's possible and help ensure the future of a landmark independent bookstore in Cambridge. We thank you so much for continuing to show up and continuing to tune in, both in support of our authors and, of course, in support of the wonderful staff of booksellers at Harvard Bookstore. We truly appreciate your support now and always. And lastly, as you may have experienced in virtual gatherings, technical issues may arise. Of course, we hope that they don't, but if they do, we will do our best to resolve them quickly. Thank you so much for your patience and understanding. And now I am very pleased to introduce our speakers. Daphne Palasi Andreades holds an MFA from Columbia University, where she was awarded a Henfield Prize and a Creative Writing Teaching Fellowship. She is the recipient of a Breadloaf Writers Conference Scholarship, among other honors. Megha Majumdar is the author of the New York Times notable novel of Burning, which was nominated for the National Book Award, the NBCC's John Leonard Prize, and the American Library Association's Carnegie Medal. And she is the editor-in-chief at Catapult Books. Tonight, they will be discussing Daphne's debut novel, Brown Girls. Through a series of vignettes and a polyphonic chorus of voices, the novel weaves a story of a deep and ever-changing friendship among 5 young women, all children of immigrants, all growing up in Queens. Acclaimed author Nicole Dennis Benn calls Brown Girls a masterful triumph and continues, every page captures moments of wonder and hard truths about brown girls coming of age, grappling with conflicting influences, loss, gender, sexuality, and being second-generation immigrants in America. I am delighted to turn things over to our speakers. The digital podium is yours, Daphne and Megha.
Good evening, everyone. It's so fun to be here tonight. Thank you so much, Harvard Bookstore and GrubStreet, for having me. And thank you so much, Megha, for your time tonight. I'm really excited to chat with you. I will be reading from the opening pages of my debut novel, Brown Girls, just the first 3 pages. Brown Girls. We live in the dregs of Queens, New York, where airplanes fly so low that we are certain they will crush us. On our block, a lonely tree grows. Its branches tangle in power lines, its roots upend sidewalks where we ride our bikes before they are stolen. Roots that render the concrete slabs uneven, like a row of crooked teeth. In front yards, not to be confused with actual lawns, grandmothers string laundry lines, hang bed sheets, our brother's shorts and our sneakers scrubbed to look brand new. Take those down, our mothers hiss. This isn't back home. In front yards grow tomatoes that have fought their way through the hard earth. Our grandmothers refuse canes. Our brothers dress in wife beaters. We all sit on stoops made of brick. The Italian boys with their shaved heads zoom by on bikes, staring, their laughter harsh as their shiny gold chains. Our grandparents weed their gardens, and our brothers smoke their cigarettes and, in time, stronger substances we cannot recognize, whose scent makes our heads pulse. Our brothers who ride on bikes, lifting their front wheels high into the air. Brown. If you really want to know, we are the color of 7-Eleven root beer, the color of sand at Rockaway Beach when it blisters the bottoms of our feet, color of soil, color of the charcoal pencils our sisters use to rim their eyes, color of grilled hamburger patties, color of our mother's darkest thread, which she loops through the needle, color of peanut butter, of the odd gene that makes us fair and white as snow. Like, what's her name? Is it Snow White? But don't get it twisted, we're still brown. Dark as 7 p.m. dusk, when our mothers switch on lights in empty rooms, exclaim, "Oh, there you are." Thank you.
That was beautiful, Daphne. And hi, everybody. If that stunning reading hasn't convinced you, let me just say that I tore through this book. I loved it. It's so daring. It's so bold. It has such a vision. It just got a rave in the New York Times. The back cover is full of raves by various wonderful writers. And I hope that at some point during this hour, you will get a copy of this book from Harvard Bookstore. But Daphne, I have so many questions for you, but maybe we can start in the beginning. How did you start writing, and how did you come to the idea for this book?
Right. So I was in the second year of my MFA program at Columbia when I started writing what would become the opening pages of Brown Girls. I didn't start knowing that it would be a novel. I had only written short stories up until that point. And at the time, I had this incredible fiction workshop professor named Elisa Chappelle. And Elisa is an author. She is also a co-founder of the literary organization Tin House. And I am an Elisa stan. Like, Elisa is absolutely fierce. She held us to very, very high standards, I think, as young writers, and she really pushed us. At least that's what I remember taking away from her class. And so I remember she said a lot of things, but I remember one really amazing thing that stuck in my head one day in class, and she quoted Toni Morrison, the great, and she quoted Toni Morrison, who said, "If there's a book that you want to read that has not been written yet, then you must be the one to write it." And I remember going home, leaving class and getting on the N train back to Brooklyn, where I now live, and pulling out my journal and I just started writing. Like, I love writing on the subway. I think it's a weird quirk. Not anymore because of COVID, unfortunately. So I lost my office space. But anyway, I was so inspired. I was thinking about that quote, and I was like, what is the story that I want to read, but I haven't seen? And I thought of Queens, my hometown, where I had grown up. I wondered, like, why was it a place that was kind of underrepresented in art and literature? And I also knew that I wanted to read a story that just um, unashamedly, unabashedly centered women of color and immigrant daughters like myself. My family is from the Philippines. My parents immigrated here in the 90s, early 90s. And Queens is such a fantastic, weird, eclectic, vibrant place. And then I guess lastly to the origin story, the last thing I will say is that Elisa also really encouraged our class, and me as a writer at that point in time, this was like 2017, to take risks in our work. And I thought, I want to do something different than what I have been reading, than what I've been studying and seeing in my classmates' work, and not be afraid to make kind of unconventional, strange choices. And it doesn't matter if I'll fail, it's just exhilarating to try. So I think that's really like the spirit in which the book was born.
I love that. I love that. And now I really want to take a class with Alyssa Chappelle. But I do want to ask you, so you touched on, wanting to take a risk, which I
Yeah.
think this book does so beautifully. For
Mhm.
those who haven't read the book yet, do you want to talk a little bit about, do you just want to introduce the book and the voice, which I think is so distinctive and which not a lot of other books do?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, if you want to introduce that and then tell us how you came to that voice.
Sure. Yes. My novel is told through what I like to call a choral perspective. Um, it uses the we voice, which I don't want to get all technical or whatever, but this is not a craft lecture or anything,
It
but
could be.
it could be. It could be. um, that perspective is commonly known as the first person plural, but I don't really like that term because I think first person plural implies that there is an I behind the we. And I don't think there is an I. I don't think there is a singular individual voice behind that we. So that's why I like to call it a chorus of women's voices. And so who is this we? Who is this chorus? It is, again, just primarily second generation immigrant daughters from Queens, New York, this very particular place. They are women who are of different diasporas. Um, and so that's the perspective that I chose to tell the story in.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up?
Yes.
So I really love how you are positioning this chorus as kind of fundamental. There is no I behind it. And what do you think this voice allowed you to do with the book that following just one character would not have?
Yeah. Yes, I really wanted to use this we voice, this chorus, because I think that it allowed me to really capture this like range and breadth of experiences, and to be just wonderfully and wildly expansive, and show the range of possibilities, paths, experiences, in what it might look like to be a young woman of color, to be an immigrant in contemporary America.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I can be a little bit more specific in that I wanted this we to examine these shared experiences of like how these young women's families have been impacted by Western imperialism and colonialism, how these historical forces have shaped their own families' immigration and like assimilation journeys. I wanted the we to be able to talk about like gender expectations and just like the kind of prejudices that they face in America.
Mhm.
And I was really inspired by Julie Otsuka, this book by Julie Otsuka called The Buddha in the Attic, which I think is so underrated. It was published in 2011, and it also uses this like very expansive we perspective, I think like a choral we, and it like expands to encompass this like collective voice, but then can also like zero in and focus on an individual for one paragraph or one sentence. Or like a character can appear in one scene and reappear again down the line or never again. It's just so, it inspired me when I first read it early in college. It was just so deft and graceful and poetic. It's always stuck with me.
It's a book that I've heard such beautiful things about, and you are convincing me that I really need to read it.
Girl, you have to.
Can I, will you allow me to read like two sentences
Oh, yeah.
that really struck me in your book and that really came to mind as you were talking about the big themes of this book? And so this is from page 132 for anybody who already has the book, page 132. And it goes, brown girls, brown girls, brown girls who in their bones are beginning to understand that they are the sum of many identities, many histories at once. The colonized, the colonizers, where do we fall? And I found that just so profound, such a huge question. And I feel like that question runs through this book, but the way in which it is presented is so like the scale of that question is brought down to the human in such a beautiful way. And I want to ask you about some of the themes here a little bit. Like, I love the relationship here between immigrant mothers and their American daughters. What about that relationship called you as a writer?
Ooh, I think sometimes I find that it's hard to know exactly some of the decisions um, when writing a piece. I think so much of creating, at least for me, happens like partly on an unconscious level, and it's often through these conversations or conversations with readers or like my editor or revision uh, that I think I really start to articulate for myself. Yeah, why did I have this thread of the mothers in the book and their daughters and this conflict, I guess, between them. Um, and I guess I will say that I think I was interested in showing these different relationships to America, that like a first generation um, American might have, versus say their second generation daughters who might be born and raised in the States, for example. And I think thinking back on the book and my own experiences, I think with the first gen mothers, I think what America represents is very much like the land of opportunity, economic wealth, so much promise, the American dream, in all its like idealism and glories and things like that. And for the second generation daughters who, I mean, there are some first generation characters as well in the book, but For the second generation daughters who are primarily born and raised in the States, they attend American schools. They are totally fluent in English. I think America represents something different to them. I think the characters are also like, what is this great American dream that you're talking about? Their experience of like feeling like outsiders sometimes. So with the mothers, this thread, the storyline of the mothers and the daughters, there's definitely I would say like an intergenerational conflict. And I think the book, I think it was interesting to write through like, is that a conflict that can be bridged somehow? Can there be like a recognition of these differences and their different attitudes and relationships to America? Can there be an understanding? And so that was really fun and challenging, I think, to write into, and because it's not my experience. It's not my experience to, like the mothers in the book,
But I
leave.
think you have written it so beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Sorry, I did not mean to cut you off.
No.
Uh,
So much. There's so much I could say. But I'll stop there.
Can I ask you about one more thing, which I am clearly bursting to ask you about, which is the backbone of this book is these friendships among these young women who all grew up together in Queens. And you write these friendships with such, like there's the thorniness of very close friendships. There's also the love. There's the kind of enduring relationships that they are. I was curious about, while you've been writing this book and living through the pandemic, has your view of friendships and friendship changed?
Ooh, I love that. I think if anything, this crazy time in the pandemic has made me much more appreciative of my friends, and it it's really made me miss seeing their faces in person. And yeah, it's been tough for everybody, but my friends were so instrumental to writing this book, and they're very, very happy that it's now out in the world. Yeah, I as preliminary research for the book, I had actually interviewed a couple of very informally interviewed a couple of my childhood friends and cousins, and to kind of step outside of my own experiences and really try to capture this we, which was, the aim for the book, how to capture this broad range. So yeah, that I'm very grateful to them. They really, really were so generous. Oh, I should also qualify that and say that their experiences did not make it into the book in any parallel sort of way. It was more like an imagination. Their experiences sparked the imaginative side, I guess.
I love that. For anybody who is watching, who is curious to do this kind of informal, like friends and family research and like interview them, do you have any advice? What did you learn from that process?
Ooh, well, what did I learn from the process? I love that. I guess for me, it was just more fascinating and important to just listen and to hear how their experiences overlapped with mine or also diverged, and being respectful of that in order to convey those experiences on the page. Yeah, it was really fun to ask them. I think it helped to already have that rapport and friendship
Mhm.
built in. But it was really fun to just ask them questions like, what are sights and sounds from growing up in Queens that come to mind? Or what's the difference, in your opinion, versus dating dating someone who is a person of color versus dating someone who is not? Or what are things you know from like growing up in the States that your parents don't know, and vice versa? What are things your parents
Mm.
know that you don't know? So I think it was really fun to have ask them some of those questions and see what could come out of them as material for the novel, and like imagining conflicts and scenes.
Oh, I love that. That sounds wonderful.
Thank
Just
you.
like a really special process too.
Yes.
So we already have questions coming in
Okay.
into the Q&A, and I will remind everybody watching that if you have questions that come to mind, please put them into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We can start getting to them. I also have a lot of questions, but let's see
Yeah.
what we have here. Question from Colton. These opening pages are beautiful, and the description feels particular, unique to these girls. I'm going to try and shorten it a little bit because it's a bit of a long question, if that's okay,
Sure.
Colton. Okay, here's a TLDR. Do you always have to pull from the girls as a collective, or can you pull from a single girl if only she has the voice to articulate something that's drawn the attention of the authorial conscious? I don't think I understand the question. Oh, I think the question is about like your knowledge of these characters as a
Mm.
collective.
Mhm.
Are you always like, is there something about the collective that you are constantly drawing on? Like, is it the network, the webs, the relationships between them that you are kind of drawing on as the author? Or do you feel like you're going into one character and then another to build the collective? Does that make sense? I
Yeah.
think that's what Colton meant. Sorry if I
Okay.
butchered it.
Thank you so much for your question, Colton. Yeah, no, as you can tell, the we is a little bit difficult to define, sometimes, because precisely because it is so fluid. And that's the challenge, with a very traditional first person point of view. You are limited to that character's perspective. With a third person, it's like a kind of like a bird's eye view. But with this we, that was the challenge of trying to define, like, how can this we be expansive? When can it be expansive? When can it contract and focus on the individual? Yeah, it was tricky, sometimes, but I maintain that fluidity, and I think there's something about it that refuses to be pinned down sometimes. But I do hope that you read the book and kind of see, um, maybe a little bit of what I'm talking about, and how it can really expand and contract at will and be that fluid and free.
Yeah. Here's another question from an anonymous attendee. Hearing your work tonight, it almost sounds like verse or a prose poem. Were there poets who influenced the novel's style and structure? And, feel free to talk about particular poets or just about poetry in general.
Yes, okay. I love that question so much, and that is a huge compliment, anonymous, because I actually studied poetry, before studying fiction. I would not call myself, a poet. I also think that genre can be very, like, limiting sometimes, as a writer, to just call yourself a poet or call yourself a fiction writer or nonfiction writer. As you can see, I think the book draws from nonfiction. It draws from kind of traditional narrative techniques in that you see in fiction, conflict, etc., world building, but it also draws from poetry on this like sentence level language sense of like an attention to sound, the sonic qualities, to rhythm, to sensory details, to imagery. That was all so important to me. I think those lessons from my early poetry classes like just imprinted in my mind and were just groundbreaking for me. Specifically for brown girls, love I love and was inspired by Claudia Rankin's poetry collection Citizen, as well as Maggie Nelson's poetry collection Bluets. I really see those texts as hybrid texts in that they like draw from history, philosophy, media, and they're just so free and voracious. So I love that. I love that and wanted to do that in my own work as well.
And I mean, your attention to language was picked up on by none other than Dwight Garner in the New York Times, who, I'm sorry to embarrass you, but I have to quote this one line from that beautiful, gorgeous review, which said, it's a treat always to read language that is excited about itself. I think like I would just have that framed on my wall. Yeah, it's really beautiful. And this is a good moment to remind everyone to please support Daphne, support Harvard Bookstore in this third year of this seemingly endless pandemic. I think Nell just put a link in the chat to purchase the book. Please purchase the book before the hour is up. We have so many questions coming in. This is great. Another anonymous attendee asks, I can't wait to read the book. Curious about if you could talk about how you approached writing about queens.
Ooh, another favorite topic, anonymous. I love Queens. It's my hometown. I've mentioned this before with other amazing authors I've gotten to chat with, my editor. But Queens is such a special, unique place because it is the most ethnically and linguistically diverse place in the entire US, if not the world. And I think that's so incredible that you can walk down the block in Queens on Queens Boulevard or Roosevelt Avenue, for example, and just find this incredible mix of people side by side. So that's why Queens is just really special and really unique to me. So that's why it also puzzled me, like as to why it hadn't really been represented or featured in art or literature. I hope my book changes that. I hope other Queens writers, I don't know, feel free to write about Queens or whatever they want.
Great. Here's a question from, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, Oluwapemi Aguda, who says, I love the conversation about risk. When the vignette is over, yours were so succinct yet varied in length. What is the logic of vignettes here? Like, what is your advice on writing vignettes?
Ooh, so this question, this is from my friend Pemi, for short. Hi, Pemi from Breadloaf, in Florida right now. I wish I could be on the beach with you if you're on the beach. Um, Gosh, those are such great questions. Risky books. Yeah, you know that I am obsessed with Julia Otsuka. Also, as I mentioned, Claudia Rankin, Maggie Nelson. I really loved The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. I found that risky in terms of like her her humor, her badassness in that sense. Badassery, I don't know what to call it. Um, I love that, and like how she could talk about like politics, but also like make it funny and concrete. Who else besides Arundhati? Um, I love this novel Slumberland by Paul Beatty, who was one of my teachers at school. And it's just so, I feel like reading the book, reading the language, I think what inspired me most in terms of risk taking, again, I think was that like utter honesty on the page of saying it's fine to say something like outrageous or like the thing you wouldn't ever say in a normal conversation. I think that's why I love art. You could just express those things, and be so free. So Slumberland. Um, the second part of the question was about vignettes and
Yes.
right.
Your advice for writing vignettes, or the kind of short chapters that you have in this book.
Ooh, yeah. I think a vignette. I mean, you can also view them as not too different from more traditional scenes or chapters, you know, which can end abruptly or end in an unexpected way.
Mhm.
There are parallels, but I suppose with the vignette, what's different is they're more compressed. They're a lot more. I don't know. I don't want to say concise, but they're very concentrated.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. It's. I didn't have any hard and fast rules. It was more, I guess, of an intuition.
But there is, such a richness and a kind of like density to
Yes.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, here are two questions from Francine Katzen that I'm going to put together. One is, did you write the book from start to finish?
Mm.
Or did you like write different parts and put them together? And the second question is, did you know how the book would end while you were writing it? Which I'm so glad they're asking about the end, because the end is marvelous and strange and unexpected. So I'm very curious to hear about it too.
Thank you, Francine. I wonder if this is the same Francine from an Instagram live that I did earlier in the day. That I'm just thinking out loud. Um, Thank you so much, Francine, for those great questions. Um, I I guess I will say yes that I did write the book from start to finish. In that, like, I thought it would be a shorter piece. I was telling. Oh wait, did I mention this earlier? I had only written short stories. Yes, I mentioned that
Mhm.
up until this point. So I thought that it would just be a short story, but then I found that like I kept accumulating pages, and I couldn't stop thinking about the world of Queens. I couldn't stop thinking about what this we voice could do, or couldn't do. I wanted to just keep writing into both of those things. So I just yeah, accumulated those pages. I also wanted to follow the girls, or the protagonists, as they grew older.
Mhm.
Um, So I think all those reasons just kind of lent itself to, um, again, yeah, just an accumulation of those vignettes, of those different scenes. What would it be like when they're mothers? What would it be like when, if they travel back to ancestral lands? What would it be like when they meet up again as friends, but they're older? Um, so I guess there was just more of a curiosity and seeing what could happen. Um, and then as to your second question, for the end of the book, I love that you're asking about the end, because to me that signifies that you read the whole thing from start to finish. And I'm like, yes, yes, great. Um, the ending, I was so it's so fascinating to think back on. One of the hardest parts of writing this book was completing the project. I think there was a part of me that was afraid to get to the end point, or like feel, because at that point I did not have an agent, I did not have an editor. And what I'm really trying to say is nobody was asking for this book. And that made it hard, I think, some days to keep going, or to like want to like finish and look into the future, and perfectionism of and the fear of like ending it. I don't know,
Yeah,
it scared me.
it's scary.
Yes. um but that's all to say, I actually completed this novel during the first wave of the pandemic, in May 2020. Maybe that was the second wave at that point. And it was difficult. It was difficult that time. That was 2.5 years ago at this point, maybe 3, I guess. Um, and it was, for myself and for so many people, an uncertain time in the world. Um, my mom, my brother, so many of my cousins are nurses um, in New York City, and I was so worried for them. And I was writing this book, and feeling like, what's the point of writing this book if it feels like the world is on fire? And what's the point of pursuing it? Like, I wasn't making any money at that point. No one was asking for it, like I said. Um, and so anyway, the ending kind of, it alludes to COVID very, very briefly. Um, and for me, the ending was, in general, I guess, was an artifact of where I was in that moment in time regarding COVID, and just just wanting to be completely free and zany. And I guess I don't want to totally spoil it. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you'll
No,
see.
that's perfect. You will indeed see when you read the book.
Yeah.
And here is one more question, which is it your birthday today?
Oh my gosh, yes, it is my birthday.
Happy birthday. Oh
Thank
my
you.
goodness. Happy birthday. It's a
Thank
question
you.
from, I'm guessing, a family member, Blanche Palasi.
Oh, my little
And,
sister.
oh my God. Hi, little sister. Thank you for
Hi,
coming.
Blanche.
And she says happy birthday, and also, how has your final draft changed since your first? But we truly have to take a moment
Mm,
to give Daphne a birthday gift, which is, please read her beautiful work.
yeah.
But how has your final draft changed?
Hmm. My little sister never asks me questions about writing, and that's like no shade on her. It's just we talk about other stuff, and I'm very happy to talk about other stuff with you, Blanche. So it's kind of strange that you're asking about it. How has the final draft changed from the first pages, or the earlier drafts? I love revision. I love it. oh my gosh, for any future projects, I'm going to remind myself, get to the end, because then you can get to revision and you can have the whole body of work to tinker with, to deepen, to like examine every sentence and then like change everything again, or go deeper on the themes, or see like what themes appear in the book that I didn't see from the beginning, but were there regardless. So I think a lot of things changed, and I love revising. I think, but I will also say what stands out most to me from those earlier drafts to the later drafts was just having this feeling of freedom again, and being like, I can say whatever I want to say. I can make those weird, bold, unconventional choices, and it's going to be great. It's going to be okay. And I think exciting art will call for that.
Mhm.
For me, it was that feeling of holding on to that
Mhm.
later, and developing the confidence, I guess, in that later.
I
Yes.
love that. Well, in the Q&A, Francine Kadsen says happy birthday. And let me just say that if other people want to wish Daphne a happy birthday through the Q&A, I will not stop you. Might be kind of nice. Feel free to say happy birthday in the Q&A.
Yeah.
We have so many questions. I'm just going through them. Here's one from anonymous person who
Okay.
says, I'm wondering if anything about the writing or publishing process has surprised you. Any tips for other writers now that you are published?
Ooh, that's a great question. Something that surprised me about the publishing process and tips. Um, there's so much. There's so much, because it's a whole other business side, it feels like, to enter into. I mean, it's it's hard enough for me, it was hard enough for me to finish the draft, to have belief in the work and get to the end. And it's another thing to enter the business side and the publishing side of trying to like sell the work, or find the right editor, the right agent to work with. But I I held off. I held off on pitching anyone, or pitching agents. I want to start by saying that it was really, really important to me to make sure that, for me, my manuscript was in a place that I was proud of, and that it was saying everything I had hoped it might say. And it was, it was still a different draft back then. Um, that I was confident in it. It was really important to me to know that I had gone through these steps um, of of revising, of sending it to early readers, rinse and repeat, at minimum of 3 times, and to know that this manuscript is going to be the best that it can be before going out into trying to make more of those professional relationships. Um, so that's kind of the attitude that I had. I wanted to be patient, and I think it was also really important for me to get my manuscript into a place that I was proud of, because I knew that those rejections would come.
Mhm.
And people would say, this is not for me, this is not the right fit, for agents and for editors. Megha is an editor herself, and an author herself, so she like knows everything about the process, like both sides. But I knew that I would get those rejections. And then it was important for me to feel like, okay, I know I'm confident in my work. it's definitely just not a good fit. Like I know I've done everything I can for this work, so I'm going to find the right person who understands the work, and it's not for lack of revision, for lack of a vision. And that gave me confidence to move forward in approaching publishing professionals.
That's very wise. There are some happy birthdays coming in for you in the Q&A, Daphne, whenever you have a chance to look.
Oh my gosh.
And we only have a few minutes, so I'm going to ask one last question from Rachel Krantz. Thank you, Rachel. And then after that, perhaps we can have Nell back on screen from Harvard Bookstore and wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Here's our last question. It has been so fun to see your already amazing publishing journey. What has been the most meaningful moment to you so far?
Oh man. It's so hard. It's so hard to pick just one, because this is my first book. This is my first debut baby, only debut baby, first book baby. And I've never gone through the process before. So everything is very new and sometimes scary, sometimes overwhelming, but always fun. And so it's been really wonderful to like get to all these different points in the process of finishing a draft I'm happy with, of signing with my publisher, and finishing edits with her. Like those are very meaningful moments. But I will say, I guess just because I'm living it right now, and it's my pub week, it's my launch week, it has been most meaningful to finally think that the book is out in the world. It's in readers' hands. That is like beyond what I can even imagine. That I can't imagine it. I still can't imagine that, like, across the country and internationally, the book is reaching readers. All I wanted to do was like finish that draft and have it speak to a sense of freedom and boldness. So that's probably the most meaningful thing right now.
That is so beautiful, Daphne. Everybody read this wonderful book.
Thank you so much, everyone, and Harvard Bookstore and GrubStreet.
Thanks so much to both of you. This was just such a lovely conversation, and just thank you also for all the book recommendations. I was just jotting down all these notes, and love hearing Paul Beatty mentioned it. Yeah, anyway, thank you so much. This was a lovely conversation. Yes, as Megha mentioned, the link to purchase copies of the book Brown Girls is in the chat. And once again, to all of you who are watching, thank you so much for joining us. Keep reading and stay safe, healthy, and well. And thank you so much. Thanks again to both
everyone.
of you.
Thank you,
everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Megha.
Bye.
Bye. Take care. Stay safe.